Okay guys, Probe Ricky back with another female horror story. We're going to go through this from the Guardian, and it's part of the Divorce Survival Guide, and it's called The Moment Our Marriage Was Over. With a few words, she destroyed my life. He goes, I never expected to fall in love again in the waning years of middle age, with a failed marriage behind me. But this love did not lend to living together as spouses. In the last installment of this week-long series, an anonymous writer shares the most painful part of his marriage, the moment it fell apart. And this is becoming more and more common. What if the moment your marriage is over is a discovery forced upon you when your marriage has only just begun? It was a beautiful summer's day, and I was waiting for my wife of only 5 months to come home. Rather than sit around, I decided to go out and buy something nice for lunch. When I got back from the market, my wife was back, and I could tell at once that she was in a bad mood. When she got angry, I knew to leave her alone until she was ready to talk. Well, fuck that, man. If somebody's going to act like that around me, I'm kicking them out. I'm kicking them to the curb. Nobody's doing that to me. And nor should you let that sort of behaviour happen to you. He's let this woman get it too easy by the sound of it. So I started making lunch, and she made herself scarce. Eventually she reappeared, and I asked her what was wrong. Nothing, she replied, and usually this can be a sign that they're mucking around with somebody else, if there's particularly no reason for it. A few minutes later, the atmosphere thick with tension, I asked her again, I've made a mistake in marrying you. I can't live with you. And with those few words, she destroyed my life. I've made a mistake in marrying you. I can't live with you. We were both in late middle age, both of us with failed marriages behind us. I hadn't expected to find love again. It hadn't been long. I hadn't been long looking for it, and if I'm honest, I would have said at the time that falling in love was something that happened to my children, not to people approaching their dotage. But fall in love I did, and it was overwhelming. It wasn't the love so much as the falling that was the problem. Without realizing it, I had made her front and center of my life, and this is where we go wrong. Once you pedestalize a woman, you're going to get hammered. They don't like it and they don't want it. They'll feed on it. They'll take it. They'll take the pedestal, but they'll kick you off your throne. And they'll kick you out. That's just how it works. You have to have your masculine frame. You have to stay in your masculine frame, and you have to be the leader in the relationship. Not in a cruel way, but if you're giving everything and making her front and center of your life, that is just not what women like. Doesn't matter if you've always been a hopeless romantic, as he says there. That's irrelevant. He says, I recall at school being struck by the idea of courtly love in the Chaucer, the noble purity of it, the sublimation of self to a higher ideal, that of the love of another. Well, he's taken it all too far. It just doesn't work like that. I believe, he says, that she had fallen in love with me too. She was much less demonstrative, much more guarded, but the few things she did say led me to think that her feelings matched my own. At any rate, we seemed to coexist very intensely. The happiness I felt when she agreed to marry me was only matched by the happiness I felt when she walked into the register office. We'd been together as a couple for some years before the wedding, but we hadn't lived together. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see that while we were well suited as lovers, we were entirely unsuited as housemates. We should have continued as we were. dating and living apart. And that goes for a lot of you guys as well. Some of you would have been better off just dating and living apart. But the problem is, for a lot of you guys, you're called what I call, and others call, cock blockers. You only want to hang around at 24/7 so nobody else can take it from you. But usually that's just a figment of your imagination anyway. And this is really good advice. I should have, as we were, just kept dating and living apart. And when you're this age, my age and that, what's the point in trying to live with somebody? They're set in their ways, they do their stuff, you take them away from whatever they like, 9 times out of 10 it falls apart. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. I moved out the same day as she delivered her bombshell, back to my old apartment that I had been trying to sell since the day of the wedding. Luckily for me, the housing market had flatlined. The following day I asked her if she had meant it. She texted me, "I'm sorry, but I've made up my mind." I asked to see her to discuss it. She agreed, but refused to say when. I don't want to read into this too much, and I haven't read it, but what's happened here? Is it just a case of this guy was too good to her? A week of unendurable pain and anxiety later, she contacted me to say that we should meet. I cannot describe how frantic I was, how desperate my desire to save my marriage, which had been so precious and I had thought invulnerable. Well, that's the thing with women. Nothing's invulnerable, nothing's safe, because they live by the moment. The encounter lasted 10 minutes, during which I learnt nothing, except that she was still angry. Oh, she was just a bitch, right? That's all she was. She's probably, I would say, for the most part, being influenced at least by somebody else, or probably seeing somebody else. Her last words as she left were, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." And this happens a lot. I'm sorry for ruining your life or disrupting your life. This is not uncommon. I haven't spoken to her since, although we both live in the same town. I've only actually seen her 3 times, and 2 of those times she was in a car. We are now divorced. And it's as simple as that. You can be living with somebody 1 minute, married and all the rest of it, and completely and utterly separated and divorced the next day. I've experienced it, I've seen it, and that's just how it goes. But in my case, I divorced her in both cases. I came over time to understand that she had discovered that living with me was too claustrophobic, that I had failed to meet her expectations, that I turned out to be a better boyfriend than a husband. I too had recognized that our life together wasn't perfect, but I hadn't minded. I had wanted our union to work, come what may. Well, what you wanted and what she wanted was definitely 2 different things. I realise now that while what she did was entirely forgivable, was it forgivable? What'd she get married for in the first place if she, probably underneath knew she wasn't going to be able to stay? That way she did it with less, I realise now that while what she did was entirely forgivable, the way she did it was less so, exactly. Even though I now have forgiven her. Life's too short to hold a grudge, for one thing. Hemingway put it very well. The most painful thing is losing yourself in the process of loving someone too much and forgetting that you are special too. And this happens a lot to people, guys. This happens to men all the time. And I'm dealing with men, not women, so that's where my focus is. Let me just repeat those tragic words that he was delivered. She said to him when she was angry. Where is it, guys? Me too, the registry office. We've been together for a couple of years for the wedding, but we hadn't lived together. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see while we were well suited as lovers, we were entirely unsuited as housemates. So just be careful, guys. You don't have to live with this person. You don't have to, cock block every bloke that comes across this person's path. There's things that are completely out of our control in relationships, guys. And you just want to hope to God that you meet the right person and that they're going to be faithful and stand by you. And if they do, be grateful, because it's not a promise and it may not happen, for everyone. Make the most of the faithfulness while it's there and be reciprocal. And if things start going by the way, then just accept it. It's not necessarily your fault. People change. It can happen at any tick of the clock. And you've got to accept that. We're not culturalized for failure, but we should be. We should have the tools to understand that when things go bad, we're able to face it, deal with it, and move forward, because everybody's different. Sometimes a relationship's not meant to last a lifetime. It could just be your turn with that person for such and such a period of time. And that's hard to accept, but it's just the way it is. That's why I don't personally believe marriage works in 2023. And if that doesn't suit you, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't. Particularly if you've got assets, there's too much to lose for the sake of somebody just changing their mind. This is Pro Bricky. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share the video as well. They're here for people to learn from. Bye for now.